Just hit record. Hi, it's Paul Cohen here. I think we're the 12th of May 2020. We're coming up to the end of our lockdown here in New Zealand, and part of thing that I'm looking at offering is contacting friends, people that I know, inspirational people who I can bring on these Zoom in Touch wisdom talks, just to help support us in some way or other. And so I've invited Amy Matthews here, and I'm really pleased. I'm really excited, actually, and I'm sure that's what happens with a lot of people, because Amy is, I think, since my yoga teacher training is probably, and you don't know this, but I'm sharing this with you now, Amy, but one of my influences, my main influences on so many different levels and ways, and we'll probably touch on some of those as we're talking. And if you don't know, Amy is she's co-author of Yoga Anatomy, which I think is still the best-selling yoga book out there in the world, which is an incredible book. And then I also met Amy and Leslie when I did their online training, which has been both very, very different styles, but both been so supportive, informative to me as well. And Amy's also been part of the Breathing Project, and now your focus is more on the Baby Project. So I've done my little introduction, Amy. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Paul.
How would you like the world to know you at the moment, if you were to say, this is who I am?
I don't know. I mean, the big thing is all these things I thought I were, the pandemic has made it, so I don't know.
Yes.
But I think that what I would add to what you said is that I also am a Laban Movement Analyst.
Yes.
And a body mind centering teacher.
Yes.
And in the body mind centering world, along with being a teacher, I'm what's called an Infant Developmental Movement Educator.
Yes.
An IDME.
Yes.
And that work, that developmental movement work, both with adults that I do and with infants that I do, is the heart of what has become the Breathing Project. I mean,
the Baby Project.
The heart of what's become Babies Project in New York, which I run with with a friend of mine, Sarah Barnaby, who's also a BMC teacher and an IDME.
Yes. So you got involved with doing yoga how many decades ago? When did you first start exploring yoga?
Yoga.
Or movement or dance? What was your intro?
So my start was as a dancer, and I was one of those little girls who wanted to be a ballerina.
Yes.
So I took ballet classes, but I'm too short and I'm too round to be a ballerina. But in high school, I found modern dance, and I did that. I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. So I mean, a big city in the Midwest, but still not a big city. And I went to school in Minnesota. And I studied theater there, theater and dance and philosophy, and ended up moving back to Omaha and doing all kinds of day jobs, but being part of a collective of people making theater. And so I made theater, which involved the acting side of it, the directing but the movement component of it. So we would do some original works and movement stuff. And one piece we did was about Frida Kahlo. I feel like this was a tipping point for me, because I was directing a piece where we had an actress playing Frida, and we had a dancer playing Frida's dream self. And I was talking to like, I knew how to teach a dance class and talk to a dancer. And I knew from my training kind of how to talk to an actor. But juxtaposing those two languages in the same conversation with two different people, and the actor would say, like, I need to know my motivation, I need to know why I'm doing this, and I would say, I don't know why, I just want to see what it looks like. And the dancer would say more, don't tell me all the motivation, just tell me what to do, and I don't want to know about this emotion stuff. I'm terribly oversimplifying the conversations, but I realized that the whole language of movement was not.
So say that again. Sorry, your whole language of movement. Sometimes
was not when I saw it freeze up. A language for movement, distinct from a particular style of something. Like rather than a style of dance, I realized that like I didn't really know how to talk about movement that wasn't sport or dance or, you know, oriented to some particular aesthetic. And around that time, I also got a job teaching in a rural college, teaching dance. And they wanted me to teach jazz. And it was like these kids' gym requirement. And I was like, I don't really think that they need to learn jazz hands and a grapevine. And I mean, there's value in all of it, but I realized I'm really curious about what it is to teach movement, not necessarily to get to a certain aesthetic. This is a roundabout way to get to yoga, but it does get me to yoga.
Yeah, no, please go on.
Okay. So I had heard somewhere in my dance training about this Laban work.
Yes.
And I moved to New York in 1989 to do that is not right. I moved to New York in 1996 to do a year-long program in Laban Movement Analysis. And the idea is, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's
only a little bit, but please, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's meant to be a practice or a study where you look at movement and learn how to describe it. One of the many ways to say is that we're trying to describe the qualities without making a judgment call about it. So how do I observe? How do I describe? How do I analyze, but not make meaning? Which is a paradoxical practice because, of course, whatever we look at, we're looking through our own personal lens. But in theory, and Rudolf von Laban, who started this body of work, he developed this language for describing what body part is moving, where it's moving in space, and then what are the dynamic qualities of it. So the study of this Laban movement analysis study is about kind of learning how to look at movement and not say, oh, I like that, I don't like that, or that's good, or that's bad, but like, how do we describe the quality of it without necessarily judging it? So I thought I was doing that to learn a set of tools so that I could really master talking about movement. But what it did instead is it kind of set me on this path of realizing that what the subjectivity of our observations, but still the value of trying to make observations. So in the course of doing that, you do a thesis project. It's kind of it's a graduate level degree, basically. And so my thesis project was on moving meditations. And I had this idea that in my limited experience at the time, most of what I'd met was like there are movement practices and then there are meditative practices, and the meditative practices count on stillness. But I was like sitting and being still, and in my very limited experience at the time. But I had started taking some yoga classes because when I moved to New York and tried to take dance classes, I was like, I don't have the chutzpah to try to take a dance class in New York. So I started taking yoga classes instead, and realized that there was some question I was interested in getting at about a meditative state that arises in movement and what that is. And I set out to do this thesis project to look at yoga and Tai Chi and the whirling dervishes. And I had kind of a movement theory about how they each used qualities of weight and time and space.
Yeah.
And my advisor at the time said, that is a really ambitious project. And I was like, oh no, I'll spend a month on yoga. I'll spend a month on Tai Chi. And yeah, it was a huge project. And I just dived into yoga. And sometimes I say like 25 years later, I'm still finishing up that project.
Yeah.
So, but I started looking at not just doing yoga kind of as a substitute for dance, but what the practice was about. And in that moved from, I had been taking very kind of movie vinyasa music, those really fun kind of just move and do stuff with your body classes to luckily being in New York, I was like, well, I'll take a tour of the yoga in the city. And I met some amazing teachers. I also met, like, getting to do this, I met like teachers that said with absolute conviction completely opposite things about the right way to do Trikonasana. You know, and in my analysis oriented mind, I was like, now they can't both be right, so maybe neither is right, or here's that subjectivity again.
Yeah.
So I got interested in the kind of like anthropology or of the different styles of yoga and what they're each getting at, and kind of analyzing those, and my own proclivities were to try to take out not that I don't think there's a spiritual aspect to it, but take out the moral, the right, like you're a better person if you do this, like take that, set that aside, and just like, what is a movement practice about? And so that question drew me in. What is a movement practice? And I had a student who was a karate teacher. Then I had started teaching on the Laban program. So a year later, and then a student came in, lots of dancers came through, but she was a karate teacher. And we had these conversations about practice. And she would take my yoga class as part of her karate practice. And I then studied karate for years as part of my yoga practice, in this question about like, what is a movement practice? So that, yeah, so that's what got me to yoga, I think, is that question of, well, what is a movement practice? And yoga is the one I landed on first, so it's the one I've kind of stuck with. But I have gone style to style to style. I'm like a serial monogamist with different styles of yoga. So for a while I did a lot of this, and then I switched to a lot of something else. And I tend to pick one and go into it and see what I can get out of it. Mm-hmm. In a different way than, like, what I practice myself is really different than what I teach. But that's another question also. I think I'm going to pause and like ask me a question, because I could.
Thank you so much. It was a lovely intro into your development and your movement towards yoga, and the things that you know. There are some teachers that you hear and they say something, and you go, wow, that really resonates with who I am and where I am, or it resonates with where I'd like to be, or there. So when you communicate, for me there's always these ahas, and I'm feeling, oh yeah, that's, so that kind of sense of meditation with movement, or being present with movement, or embodiment with movement. And I'm not really into yoga per se. I'm not really into being stuck in a pose. I don't. Mm-hmm. I like I like that exploration and that journey to wherever you get to. But the final place is just, if you keep it as a final place, it just has a funny energy about it if that's your only goal. And so my focus is probably similar to yours in some ways, where it's more internally focused. So I call it yoga from the inside out. So it's more about what's happening internally rather than what I'm looking like externally. But I need that for myself, because I come from a stiff stock. I can never do the yoga things that people can do. That's just it. I can't do that, but I can do my yoga because I'm not competitive. I don't have to get anywhere. I just have to do the exploration. So that kind of resonates a lot with me. And I think that's, I'll tell you one of the other things that I really like. I mean, there's so many things that I can say that inspire me. And one is those when you go, how do you do it? You go, I'd just like to invite you to do this, but maybe you don't want to, or maybe if you want to do something else. And so there's always this notion of, well, I'm trying to share something with you that I think will be useful, but please don't do it if you don't want to. This is, use your own wisdom here. Don't do what I say. And Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, she said something like, I don't know what you're feeling. You have to feel what you're feeling. That kind of thing. So I've given you, look, do you want to carry on? Do you want to say something? I've given you a little pause in your intro. So,
I will say, yeah. Well, one of the things that I'm very interested in, and it partly came out of this work with the Laban work, but also then in the well, I want to tell a story about Bonnie, because this was significant when I met her, and I was doing yoga and had been curious about the body mind centering work because I'd met it, like some of it has filtered back into the Laban training. So I went to a workshop that she was doing, and she was ill in the 90s, and she was just coming back from being very ill. And I had studied already a lot of anatomy by that time, and she was teaching something that I now know is really basic to BMC about how the fingers connect to different parts of the scapula. And she was saying something where she was like, so the thumb connects to this bone here. I don't remember the name. And then it connects to this bone here. And I have watched over the name and then be really defensive about not knowing the name of it. Like, oh, it's not important. That's not important. But like, I feel like I could feel that they wanted to know the name and that it was a problem that they didn't know it. And Bonnie just didn't know it. And it didn't matter because she felt it, or she got the gist of it, or like, I don't mean it in a transcendent, her knowing was so much greater, but just like, it wasn't the point of what she was saying. Mm-hmm. And I was just blown away by being in the presence of a master teacher who was not hung up on the information.
Yeah.
And I am an information junkie. Yeah. And I went into studying all these things I was going to study because I thought then I would know everything. And at some point I could get to know everything, and then I would be safe, basically. Like, it's a protective mechanism for me to know things, because then I can manage how the world is, and it's a whole like psycho-emotional shadow and strength and all of that. And I watched this teacher not know something and still hold the room.
Nice.
Like, oh. But she was clearly, she did not give up being in charge. She didn't say, I'm not the teacher because I don't remember this thing. She just said, I don't know this thing, but I'm still your teacher. I'm still teaching this moment. So I sit with this question of, and it's kind of a question in the whole somatics field and the yoga field, but in somatics about like, everybody has their own experience. So who am I to tell anybody to do anything? But at the same time, in my own experience, like, there are places I've gotten to because someone has gotten me there. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, I used to have these Iyengar yoga classes with a teacher named Kevin Gardner, who he would talk us into feeling like drops of water in the palms. I would have these transcendent experiences that I never would have gotten myself to. And it's because I trusted that teacher, and I tried on what he said, and it got me somewhere. And I think, so there's some kind of mystery there about what happens when someone is worthy of your trust and you give them your trust and you try on what they're saying. But within that, how to also hold, I mean, there are moments that a teacher will say something and I'm like, I'm not going to do that because I can't. It will hurt me. And it doesn't matter if it will hurt me or not. If I think it will hurt me, then I'm going to hurt myself. Like, in some way, it's going to be some kind of assault. So there's something really, really paradoxical and beautiful about being in the seat of a teacher and holding this place where I say, I have an idea. I have this thing, this journey I want you to go on with me, but I don't want you to abdicate all responsibility. I just want you to agree to go with me. Mm-hmm. And then keep sitting in that, what is my responsibility? And then where am I getting in my own way about something new happening? Mm-hmm. But I cannot, and I feel this so more and more strongly, I can't tell someone else whether or not they're safe. I can't tell someone else whether or not it will hurt them, because there's so many things I've learned are like safe and you can't hurt yourself like this. And I remember being in a yoga class and a teacher saying, there's no way you can hurt yourself doing this back bend, because you'll pass out from the pain before you could really damage anything. And I was at the time young and super ambitious, and I'm really bendy. So I come from the other end of it. So I'm like, great, all right, I'll just wait. And I didn't pass out from the pain because I'm a dancer, and dancers don't feel pain. And I was, 29 years old and arrogant and ambitious. And I was in pain the night. Like, I really hurt myself. I mean, I was throwing up from the pain the next day.
Wow.
So those things where it's like, push through, because I'm not interested in the kind of teaching where you tell someone to override their own impulses.
Yeah.
But I am interested in the kind of teaching where you might develop a relationship where someone might be willing to have an experience they haven't had before.
Yeah. Nice.
But all those conditions for like what sets up being willing to have a new experience is huge. It's hugely important.
Yeah.
And way, way more than saying this is a safe space.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I hear that and feel that a lot in your work, having signed up for one of your online classes, which is so cool. I love it when I see your work, and Leslie as well. Leslie for me has just got such cool ways of relating that I see the picture of what he's trying to say. And I think because he's dyslexic too, isn't he? And I'm dyslexic as well. So I need to have lots of different avenues of way of communicating. I need to see it. I need to feel it somehow. Touching it is good. I need to write as well, and all these things just to help that kind of. But for me, Leslie's got that. I just yummed out by his information, and you also, in terms of the way that you work from inquiry, and having also done some work a little bit with Bonnie. She's amazing. I'm so glad that I bumped into her, kind of almost literally, because I did a course with her last year. Yeah. I did the immersion course, and we had a lovely encounter. So it was very special. So I see her at a distance. I'm going to this course to see Bonnie, not for anything else. It's a 6-day thing. I don't know anybody else, but there was something inside of me that had to see Bonnie. And I thought, well, my brother lives in California, so it's a really good excuse. And I'm watching her from a distance, and she's coming into the room, and she's saying hello to everybody, and she's looking for people, and she's just embracing them with this warmth, and she's talking to someone for 5 minutes. And I say to one of the girls behind me, I said, is Bonnie a hugger? Because I like hugging. And she said, yeah, of course she's a hugger, or something like that. And so I made sure that the next person that Bonnie would bump into would be me. So I made myself very available, and we hugged for about 5 minutes, and I cried, and we started, and I shared a few things, and it was just one of these incredibly special moments that were without words. We were both embraced together. We started flying off, and we had to reground ourselves. And I kind of felt that I could have gone home then. That was for me enough. And that presence, I also witnessed her as well in the workshop. There was someone, I think we were doing something about maybe it was the embryo leaving the wall, or I can't remember quite what it was. There was some exercise we were doing. And then she was sitting on a chair with someone sitting on her, who was a very tall girl, and had her held easy 15, 20 minutes with not moving. And I kind of made up in my mind what she might have been doing. Was she acting as the womb and holding her in? I don't know. There was obviously, but it's very special just to be kind of in her presence and seeing her function. And sometimes she says things and I think, wow, you're really way off here. And because I don't kind of get it, but I probably know that she's really way on, and that I just haven't quite got it. And so she's been a massive influence, I know, for you.
Yeah, she has. Yeah.
Do you want to say something about that, about her?
Sure. Well, she is sometimes off. Sometimes. I was lucky. I feel like I was very lucky too. When I did when I came into doing the body mind centering training, she was not teaching on the regular certification anymore. So I did not have her as one of my main teachers. I met her in this workshop, and then I did the training with other people. But she was teaching these weekend workshops on yoga and BMC, and it's what became a whole program. But in the beginning, it was some pretty small workshops in Amherst, Massachusetts. So I would have these periods of kind of studying the curriculum of BMC, and then I would go and do a weekend workshop with Bonnie. And Bonnie, like understanding, having learning the material in the structured, kind of organized way, and then being in Bonnie's presence where she'll be like, okay, so there's this whole spread of material and you start here and then da 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 da. And what she'll do is she'll like go pull this thing out and be like, let's spend 3 hours on this. And some people just get lost. If she had been my only teacher, I don't think I would have stayed in BMC.
Interesting.
I need ways in and ways out of it.
Yes.
That were different than what she offered. She, to me, offers, I think what you described, this like, let's be here and dive deep.
Yeah.
And for me, context and the like where it is in the orientation and the like in the embryology, like the story, the timeline, the like what else is happening, all of that is really important for me to go deep.
Yeah.
But having gotten it from other teachers and then getting time with her to just drop in was amazing. And then she decided to do the program in California, to do the BMC and yoga program in California. Well, she did it in New York City then, and I assisted her. And then in California, she invited me to teach with her. So I had the opportunity to be a co-teacher with Bonnie. And one of the things, there were a lot of things I learned from that. One of them is that when it was my turn to teach, she would go in the back of the room and she would take a nap. And I asked she would take a nap. And I asked some of the BMC people who'd been in the community for longer, it's like, how come Bonnie's not watching me teach? And they were like, this is a compliment, because Bonnie doesn't let other people teach without like watching what they're doing. So the incredible gift of her lack of attention was, oh, this is a trust. That was more an interpersonal kind of thing, and a recognition that she didn't need to, it was something about it wasn't about what I was going to say. It didn't matter if I knew the information. She was giving me this room of 100 people to hold while she took a nap. And that was amazing. The other thing that would happen that we kind of evolved to is that she would teach like, and you might have heard it, like, if you do this, you'll feel this in your lung. And often I don't have the same experience she's having, right? So she would do that, and I would say, you know, Bonnie, I don't have the same experience. I have the opposite experience. Or she's less loose and I'm more loose, and this, that. And she would say, she'd say, oh, well, okay, everybody, try it both ways and see what happens. And that continual invitation, not for me, like it was never a process of I had to figure out how to have her experience. She did not want me to have her experience. She wanted me to have my own experience. And then her willingness to turn around and say that to the students, like, have your own experience. Here's the question. I mean, I think that's really, it was so profound to have a teacher really radically embody that. And the yoga teaching that I had ended up with was in the tradition of Desikachar, which was also about adapting the yoga to the individual. So I'd ended up embedding myself in that, like, yoga is an individual practice anyhow, but then to go into a somatic practice that also had so strongly, we're not trying to get to this experience of connective tissue, and we're not trying to get to this experience of, and we're not actually, I mean, we could go look for this particular rhythm, but in the end, it's not about getting any of those things. It's about the approach. And it's one of the things that when we talk about BMC, not a lot of people, there's some parts of the world where no one cares about this distinction, but one of the things we say about BMC is that it is not a technique. It is an approach. And as an approach, it can continue to explore and take in new material, and it is not a technique. It's not a set of things that we master and then we've mastered it.
Yeah.
So that appeals to me hugely. And her willingness to be that in rooms of hundreds of people, I think is just spectacular to be a witness to.
Yeah, a master at work.
Yeah.
My yoga is very similar to that. I find doing yoga classes when someone just tells me to do something, or when they say, and now collapse your ribs to the floor, and something that I've got no idea how to do it. Or when someone says completely relax, I've got no idea how to completely relax. I can relax as much as I possibly can, and I can let go as much as I possibly can if I can find that tissue. So I love that exploration for me is really important. You're going to say something, Amy?
Well, I was going to say my pet peeve is not so much the being told to do something, but being told how to respond to it.
Yes.
So do this and feel joy.
Yeah.
Do this and feel peace.
Yes.
Do this and feel how it agitates you.
Yes.
And I'm like, I'll try whatever you want, but don't tell me it's going to be relaxing. Don't tell me it's going to feel safe. Don't tell me what effect it'll have, because it's arrogant and it's patronizing and it's everything bad about teachers as masters in the yoga world and the somatics world and the whole world.
See, because we've got no idea what our students going through. Maybe there's some emotional, some history. So if we say, open up your heart and feel joy, and I'm being in this position and being violated, that's not going to be an open your heart and joy. This might be my open heart and joy, because I can only do it while I'm closed. So
exactly,
it's absolutely understanding that internal experience and understanding we are emotional beings as well.
Yes.
So I come from an acupuncture world originally. I qualified as an acupuncturist in 1985 from the 5 Element School. And then I got involved with I became a zero balancing practitioner. Have you done zero balancing work? Did you do a workshop? Okay. And then sorry.
I've heard of it, but I have a friend who, I don't really know anything.
I don't know much. Yeah, so I got involved with the zero balancing world and became a teacher of zero balancing body work, which I breathed and did everything for decades. My father also, interestingly enough, he was a senior lecturer of mathematics at Southampton University. He took early retirement. He qualified as early retirement when he was 56, qualified as an acupuncturist when he was 59, did the first zero balancing teacher training program, was also a teacher of zero balancing as well.
Wow.
So I come from a world of relating to doing body work relating to the bones and skeletal system, and particularly looking at the bone as an armature and a holding of certain vibrations, which are very different from soft tissue if you look at in terms of the potential emotional content, and looking at the ligamental tension that allowed me access from one shaft of a joint to another via the joints. And so I'm a ligamental person. And I started when I needed to move away from the zero balancing world. But before I did, I came up with bone yoga, which was a way of me giving myself a zero balancing session, or as close as I could, because I was starting to move away from me doing people, but giving things so people could do themselves. So historically, people would come, I'd give them acupuncture, a bodywork session, and then they'd go away and want to come back. So I was like, well, maybe you could do this yourself. So the essence of the bone yoga was how I could engage my skeletal system ligamentously. And then I've started doing more work with you online and doing some body work, and I'm looking at the space in the joint, and I'm looking at the fluid in the joint, and I'm looking at I've been doing a lot of movement with kindness. So instead of moving and engaging the ligaments, we're looking, how can you do that same movement with kindness, or whatever it might be. So it's developed from just being a ligamentous thing to a just. And I tell you what, you know, I just realised how little I really know. But I also really, you know, I know it's a cliche, isn't it, really? But there's this whole world of embodiment out there, which is just feels like it's never ending. I'm really hungry to know more and feel more and understand more. And so I've been offering these online classes every day, free online classes. We've done it every morning, and we've just been exploring. No competition, no right nor wrong, and it's just been a treat to be. So talking about lockdown, for me, it's been a real treat. I'm an extrovert person, believe it or not, so I use that in terms of looking at creating these Zoom in touch wisdom talks as well, and getting engaging with people. And I recognise that there's different stages of this lockdown. So for us here in New Zealand now, next week we're going to level 2, which basically means we can start going out. You can go to the gym, you can go to restaurants, you need to keep your distance, all this kind of stuff. So we're at a funny stage of like having been confined and stuck, and whether you're okay or not okay with it, that was it. There was no, you didn't have to think, you didn't have to go, you know, how am I going to earn money, because you weren't earning money, or there was lots of things that were quite strange, and it's changed as we've gone along. So I'm curious to know where you are within that as well, and or how it's been for you up until now in America, and also how whether you can suggest things that we could do to support ourselves now, needing to know that we've got to start moving forwards, but in a world that is really very unknown, because we don't know what we're moving forward into. And so it's kind of a sharing, but also a question as well within, or questions within that as well.
Okay. Well, I live in New York City most of the time. About 6 weeks ago, I left New York and came to Maine, which is where my partner lives. So I'm in Maine right now, but you know, tracking closely what's happening in New York, and it's funny because Maine has a really small population and was not very seriously hit, and they've begun kind of this staged opening up again. And New York is not opening up, and maybe in a couple of weeks they'll start. But when we look at the space that we had in New York, the Babies Project was treatment rooms. So acupuncturists and body workers used the treatment rooms, and then we had a big room that we did classes in and baby groups in, and that world is, look, we don't know what's going to happen in that world, and the rest of my work has been, you know, traveling and teaching, and traveling to Australia and Ireland and Italy, and not only is the traveling a big question, like where will I go, but then the work I do when I get there is usually groups of people coming together to move together and touch. And it doesn't have to involve touching, but there's something that happens in a group of people together that is really just a question. I mean, there's some mind of the room ephemeral thing that happens, but there's also just a conversation that happens when that person asks something and then they remember their question, and someone says something and I connect it to that thing that happened 10 minutes ago, and I don't know if that's going to happen again in my world. And the BMC program directors, there's 16 programs around the world now, and we all meet regularly anyhow, but all the program directors were talking to each other and saying, what is this going to mean? What's it mean for teaching body mind centering? What's it mean to go online? Can we teach this online? you know, I have had these online courses of my own for a long time, and people said they really enjoy doing the work online because they can do it at home in their own, like,
Mhm.
they like actually not being seen and not being in a group. So
Mhm.
there's a strength to doing the work online, and
Yeah.
then there's a disadvantage because there
Yeah.
aren't people to bounce off of and to rub your edges on. And
Yeah.
so, so I'm quite personally sitting in being really disoriented,
Yes.
because the things that I use to orient myself, like I lived in an apartment in New York and I never cooked for myself, and I got up every day and I went to the shala to practice, and I got my coffee and I went to the studio, and now I'm like in a house with a yard, and we cook every night. I have cooked every night for weeks on end. I never cook every night. Like, I haven't talked to any, you know, strangers,
Yes.
and it's great. I mean, it's great. I mean, I love being here, and I love the people I'm with, but but I'm profoundly disoriented
Yeah.
because the things I've used to orient myself, my identity around,
Yes.
I don't know what's happening with those.
Yes.
And what it what it has brought me to, well, and I'm also profoundly grateful because I haven't gotten sick. My
Yes.
family hasn't gotten sick.
Yes.
I am
Yeah.
not, I'm not, um, you know, questioning where my groceries are going to come from. I'm like, I am so lucky compared to so much of the world. So my problems are such first world problems, which
Yes.
I feel really important to say every time I
Thank you. Me too. I get
start going off on,
it. Yes.
oh, I'm so disoriented.
Yes.
Um, but it is, I think a whole lot of the world is going, well, and what can I do about this? And like this period of there's nothing to do. And I talking, my mother and my sister live in South Carolina, and my mother's like, I want to do something. Like, she's been an activist, and I want to go out and do this. I'm like, the thing you can do is don't go out. And the thing you can do to help all of us in New York is don't go out. Like, this is how to help, is to not do anything. And that, I think that's very difficult for our culture to accept, which is about doing stuff.
Yeah.
And I think there's a way that we're having another opportunity and or being forced to recognize our interdependence
Yes.
in this,
Yeah.
and the thing, when people are saying like, well, I just have to be brave and keep working. And my colleagues, when we were starting to have to cancel the BMC programs, like, there's a kind of attitude. I don't know that everybody had this, but I had it in myself. Like, well, we're outliers, and we're tough, and we're passionate. So what we've got to do is keep going. We've got to keep meeting, and we've got to keep connecting, and we've got to run our programs no matter what. And this kind of feisty, I can do it. And it's like, no, this is not how we take care of each other right now.
Mm.
Apparently, I mean, all evidence shows that what we do to take care of each other is be part of the bigger picture. And I think it's really this fierce independence is not an attitude that serves.
Serves you,
So
serves you, or so, because some people might need to go out there and be expressive as well. But my sense is that whatever you're going through, we're all going through in some way. I don't think, I think the emotions that and I don't mean that you're going through my emotions, but I think that we're certainly in the same ocean. We're in different boats, so our experiences within this are
yeah.
different. But there feels like there's a collective thing as we move through, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
holy shit, what's going on now? We're in confinement, you know, we're locked up.
Yeah.
Now we're coming out, and how can I express myself? How can I be in the world in a way that serves me, and then serves other people too? Because we have to nourish
Yeah.
ourselves in that relationship
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. I guess I don't mean the expressive element of it. I'm actually thinking about, you said you weren't going to bring up politics, and I do not know all the nuance of this, but here in the United States, our senators have gone back to work, and they've said, if our frontline people are working, then we should be working. And I'm like,
Yes.
the senators going back to work means 1,000 other people have to go to the Senate buildings to man them and to clean the toilets and to
Yes.
feed them. And
Yes.
that kind of like, we're going to work because other people are working, that's what I mean by this attitude of like
Yes.
fierce do-itness,
Yes.
which is
Yes.
actually unhelpful and unproductive. And the people, and like my mother had some of this, like, I just want to go to a Chinese restaurant to support them.
Yes.
And, you know, in Rock Hill, South Carolina. And I'm like, you can't do that. Like this, I'm going to go do it by myself is like, it's not how it's working right now. And, yeah. And
it's
so,
tough because there's lots of different fears out there, and there's lots of different, there's like so many different truths. There's the rabbit holes that we keep going down, and I went down a rabbit hole, and I had some amazing realizations that rabbit holes are actually meant for rabbits and not humans. And I retreated because it was not for me. It was uncomfortable. And so how can I live in my truth when I don't even know what the truth is out there? Kind of a question. Because one person believes this with all intensities. So similar to what you were saying before, you do this yoga and you'll have this experience, and it's like saying, well, you know, it's very, I know we live in a world that we say we're unknown anyway, but there's a massive unknown out there still.
Yeah.
And how we mold ourselves. It's like, you know, I feel you've probably done it over years, reinventing yourself as you started to work on a different project and seeing how you are. And I think we're all needing to look at how we're going to reinvent ourselves so that we can function in the world in a way that really serves us, that we know that we serve other people too. How are we going to do it, Amy? Tell us.
Well, I don't know how we're going to do it, but
oh, no.
What I do think, when you were like wisdom, I'm like, I'm not sure I have any wisdom, but I do think a lot about, I feel like what I have to rest on is the things I've practiced from working with babies. And our kind of starting idea in our work with babies at Babies Project, which comes from a BMC idea, it's a kind of hierarchy of needs or states where the first thing a baby needs is safety. And then on that, they build orientation. And on that, they build comfort. And then they can bond and then be curious. And if we don't, the idea is if we don't feel safe and we don't feel oriented, we can't get comfortable. And we can't get to relationship, and we can't get to curiosity. Now, babies are amazingly resilient, and there's a kind of problem solving that babies of all ages do, where it's like, I don't feel safe, so I'm going to figure out a strategy to feel safe. But that's not the kind of curiosity that comes out of these experiences layering together, where I know where I am, and I know what I'm doing, and I know I have support. So I'm going to go see what's over that hill, or I'm going to see what happens if I roll this way. And one of the things that we say to parents a lot that often it still feels like a revelation to me, is that babies do not need to be taught to be curious, and they don't need to be taught to move. That if these other states are present, if the circumstances are such that they feel subjectively safe, oriented, comfortable, bonded, then they will get curious and they will learn to walk. Unless there's a real physical or neurological issue, babies learn to walk. They don't have to be taught to walk. They don't have to have walking modeled for them. Like babies, humans, by their structure, the most effective organization of our limbs for getting us through space is walking and running. Right? So it will happen through the exploration of like, well, if I do it like this, if I do it like this. And so a baby actually doing it every possible way, they'll end up at what they're supposed to be doing. And more things get messed up by trying to teach them and make them and like, let's get you there faster.
Mm-hmm.
But what it means is for what it means for parents and caregivers often is kind of hanging back and watching a lot of fumbling and watching a lot of like this inefficient choices being made, right? And instead of being like, here, play with the toy like this, like they play with it like this and like this and like this. And, you know, like we have a salad spinner in our toddlers class.
Mm-hmm.
That salad spinner does everything. And then every so often a new mom will come in and be like, here, let me show you. And the toddler's often like, yeah, give it back to me. I got other things to do.
Yes.
So I'm curious about, I mean, and the baby, they get really upset. They get really confused. They get really frustrated. It's not like it's blissful being a baby. It's just shit ton of work to be a baby. But it's something like they're doing something that they have never done before. Watching them do things they have never done before is spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
And at our best, what we do when we're helping is like we do a lot of teaching parents how to hold a baby and how to handle them, so that inadvertently you're not making them like if you hold a baby, if you pick one of our big things is don't pick a baby up under their arms, because if you pick them up under their arms are not available to help them engage with the world. So we're like, pick them up from underneath, pick them up from way under their butt, support their butt and their head, and then their arms can do this other thing. Mm-hmm. So if a baby gets picked up under the arms all the time, a lot of times they'll end up kind of not using their arms, and then they fall on their face. So, I mean, a million things happen. Also, babies turn out just fine if you hold them under their arms.
Yes, too. Also. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
But that question of like, how do we create the circumstance? How do we do as adults, as caregivers, what we can do, and then we just have to let it play out sometimes. And I guess that's what I'm feeling like right now. Like I don't have any idea what's going to happen. And
you can't get to curiosity yet because you're not feeling quite safe in the first place. Is that right? Is that kind of?
Well, I am feeling now more like, I think in the beginning I was trying to plan and really disoriented. And now that I've settled more into being here, and I don't actually feel so unsafe. Mm-hmm. That what I don't have available to me is the kind of planning to ensure it happens.
Say that again, the kind of planning
where I feel like I have enough control over the circumstances to know how it's going to be.
Yeah.
And now I feel actually like I'm getting to I am getting to the curiosity like a baby has. Like I really don't know what the world holds, because none of us know what the world holds. No. And how can I kind of be in that curiosity, that wonder? And you know, there was a time in my study of anatomy and then of body mind centering, and when you were talking about all the things there are to learn, I can remember learning how to do things in my body with this kind of, I think of it as tracking, where it's like, okay, I'm going to watch every breath, mm-hmm. or I'm going to follow my blood, or and it was a controlling kind of thing. It was still an outside in, mm-hmm. like watching myself, and I'm going to master it from the outside. Mm-hmm. And there is this other process that we talk about in BMC. We make the distinction between somatization being a kind of outside in, very valuable, like teacher inviting you into something, and then the embodiment being what comes up mm-hmm. from the inside. And it doesn't have to do with tracking, and it doesn't have to do with knowing. Mm-hmm. And it has to do with language so that we can articulate maybe what our experience is, but really it doesn't matter if it's my liver or my small intestine or my lymph gland. Like the experience is the experience, and then the language we find for it becomes this, we map it onto this other thing. So I think I'm curious about, I'm curious about being in that kind of curiosity where I don't know what's going to happen, and I'm going to keep doing what I can. Like I try this and I try this and I feel better when I do this. So, okay, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the future holds, and don't know, I don't know where I'm going at Christmas time. Like, I don't know where my sister will be at Christmas time, who I usually spend Christmas with, or, all these things. It's just
all those things, and all your courses worldwide, and so you're not traveling. And but there is also that possibility, isn't there, because of using this kind of forum platform to be able to contact even more mothers and childs and babies. So there's some really great possibilities out there that I'm sure that you'll start exploring. I mean, sorry, I'm saying that, but
No, we are, and we're doing online. We do online sessions now, and great is we're getting to there. It's one of those back and forth kind of. There was something really great about caregivers bringing their babies to our space.
Yes,
and we could touch the babies and we could show them what we meant.
Yes.
And now we're Zooming. We're doing these Zoom sessions where they're in their homes.
Yes.
And we can't do it, so we have to figure out how to talk them into it. But really, when they figure it out for them, when they do it themselves, when we've talked them into it and they do it, they have so much more ownership of it.
That's nice.
Than if we did it.
So you're encouraging them to embody their own experience of their relationship of being with their child, rather than you coming up and saying, because we can still see things through the screen. I can see when you're happy and smiling, or when you're thinking a bit more. And so there's still, I mean, I was thinking of, I'm possibly going to do some online body workshops as well. And I think that I can actually be quite effective, because I can still pick up stuff.
Yeah.
So there's maybe even more potential if we're going to still, because you don't have to travel. You can meet people from Mexico and Europe at the same class, which you wouldn't be able to normally do.
Yeah. Yeah.
But touching people and being there is so important. I mean, I'm from a touchy world, and not being able to hug someone or be able to,
I think that it's, and like you just said, I don't know if you meant to, but it might even be more effective. And I'm like, I don't think it's a more or less thing.
Okay.
I think we can do some things online.
Yes, thank you.
That are really valuable. And we can do some things in person that are really valuable. And then the question becomes, like, what suits this person, and what's available to this person? And, many years ago, I had this conversation with Kevin Gardner, the Iyengar teacher, and we were having a conversation about the difference between, or comparing Iyengar yoga and body mind centering. And he'd heard of body mind centering, and he said, oh yeah, I know about that. That's really like, do whatever you want. And, that's really easy for people. And by this time I'd studied with him long enough that we could have this kind of conversation. And I said, well, I'm not sure that for everybody in the world, walking into a room and being told to feel themselves deeply enough to know what they need is the easiest thing. And I said, I see a fair number of people who come to your class every week, Kevin, for whom the easiest thing is to be told what to do.
Yeah.
And for me, certainly, like, my own personal yoga practice is often very formal. Like right now, I do the Ashtanga series 1. I mean, primary series. And I don't, I just do it so I don't have to think about what to do, because most of my other teaching is very improvisational and feel and da da da. So I'm like, give me a form to do.
Yeah.
And when I was in New York and I would have these days where I was like having to be wildly inventive about things, I would go to an Iyengar class because it would be a recuperation it would be restful to be told where to put every little thing.
Nice.
Right?
Yes. Yes.
And for other people, it's really challenging to like go to, I mean, I'm choosing Iyengar, but to go to a really form-based class and to do something that detailed, like that might challenge everything that wants to
Yeah.
scatter or blossom or blah, 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 like to just stay with one thing. And so that challenge might be what they need, where for me, it's a recuperation. For them, it's the like challenge.
Yes.
And for someone else, the challenge is to go to a room where you lie and you feel yourself.
Yes.
And then you decide. And so it's not a better or worse. It's like we have to take that person into account in that moment, in the course of that. I mean, this is the whole context of a person.
Yes.
What kind of yoga they need at that age, at that moment, in the pandemic, in the,
yeah.
you know, I remember after 9/11, Iyengar sent something out for the people of New York. And I mean, I heard about this from my Iyengar teachers, that he said, don't have people close their eyes in Shavasana. The situation in New York is such that you've just been attacked. No one should be lying on their back with their eyes closed. You should not be telling people to do that. And I was so impressed with that. Like, I mean, it was a blanket statement. And so I would go the next step and say, have people decide how they feel most safe.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I don't think it's better or worse, but I think we've been a little locked in one way of doing things, and this is the most embodied way. And I think what the Zoom calls are going to open up is some other forms of embodiment.
Yeah.
That will give us more choices.
Yeah. Yeah.
For better or for worse.
Well, they're going to be different choices. I think it's looking at possibilities when things are not going very good. Times of crises, there has to be always some kind of potential afterwards. No, there doesn't have to be. There you go. I'm doing an Amy there. I'm saying something and then I'm backtracking. Doesn't have to be anything. What was that thing that Leslie keeps saying that you say? You have to remember this. Is that his line? What does he say? There was
He
some.
often says you have to remember.
Yeah,
and I say
you don't have to remember anything.
I don't have to remember anything. You got to understand that. I'm like, no, I don't.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So have you got a simple exercise that we could explore? Do you want to do that? Do you want to share some other things of?
I think that what I would offer is another piece of the developmental work, which is called it's called the Relational Cycle, and the idea is, and I'm going to talk about what the parts are, and then we can do it as we go, and you can do it from wherever you are. But the first piece of it is to yield, and the idea of yielding is to give your weight and receive the support of whatever is underneath you. And often when I teach this, it's surprising to people how much we move through the world without actually receiving support. So the starting place is to give my weight and to receive support. And in that, to feel myself. So it's also not to settle so much that you lose yourself in your support, but in your yielding, can you feel where you are meeting your support? And can you use the presence of that support to feel yourself? So that you don't send your attention into the support, but you're really using that to feel yourself, to feel being supported. And from that yielding experience comes what we call a push, which is that point of, from some place, contact, and where you feel yielding, where you feel that supportedness, can you engage a little bit more, and can you push on the support and feel some pathway through your body? So that yield is on a continuum with pushing. And that what a push does in this model is it creates pathways in the body. And I usually do them through the bones. So like if you have your feet on the floor, can you push from your feet and your seat from your sit bones? And can you find your way to your skull? Like what's the pathway, or from your elbow or wherever you're making contact, what kind of internal pathways do you create from the presence of that support into yourself? So you're going from your surface inward. And with a baby, once they've created those pathways, or with any of us, once I have those connections into myself, the idea is that then I can start to go out into space. So if you're sitting, then if you feel the support from underneath, from your feet or from your seat, like you feel the connection through yourself, can you go to your head then? And can you reach with your head into space? And this is where I feel this kind of curiosity also. Can I be curious about the space, but also feel the support underneath me, so that as I reach, I don't reach out of myself, but that the movement to space calls up all these internal connections, so that all of me is moving into relationship with something else without losing track of myself. And then at the end of that reach, there is what we call a pull. The end of that reach, the resolution of the reach, is when do you pull? And in a baby, it's like pulling up another level, or pulling to stand, or I might reach with my head and pull myself up. And at the end of the pull is another yield. So it's a loop, it's a cycle. But at the end of each thing that we do, each place I am, the idea is to yield and feel yourself there in that new place, and see if you're safe and comfortable and blah, blah, blah. And with infants, we see them do it like changing levels, like going from lying down to sitting, and then sitting to standing. But I think for all of us, each time we find ourselves in a new place, that like, okay, where am I now? Where's my support? And the pushing part, like, how do I feel myself before I go out again? So that going out doesn't mean I leave myself behind, but going out, I have connections into myself to call on. And it's a really concrete kind of physical experience, but then it becomes, to me, a metaphorical one for all kinds of relationships and living my life.
Yeah, nice. I think that's perfect, really, because we do need to stay really grounded and present. That's for sure. Because of, I mean, we always do. We're humans on a planet. We're in relationship to our Earth, so we need to be here on the. I think so, on the Earth. We function better when we're connected. That's for sure. And then, but also to have that potential expression outward. But knowing that we can withdraw in is really good. And this is just a basic yogic pattern, isn't it? It's a developmental movement pattern, fundamental patterns. And it's lovely to come back to that again, and to feel that again, being present, and relating that to how we are in the world, really. But you know, you might find someone, I mean, again, our experiences are different, aren't they? Someone might do the yielding bit, but they might feel unsafe because they're not sure about their presence. So there's that whole inquiry again, is what is it doing for you in this moment, and what can you learn from your experience as well? Yeah. I love that.
And in theory, an infant, like the physical experiences of gravity and the floor, but as adults now, we can yield into the floor, we can yield into space, we can yield into the presence of an other. Like there's all kinds of places we get support. So I might not feel safe in my location, but I might feel safe in the relationships I'm in. So you know, we have the capacity for so many more kind of layers of experience, that it's not at all singular. or binary or absolute, or this context kind of
We're,
lenses and
we're,
lenses.
we're very complicated, aren't we, really?
Mm-hmm.
And coming back to simplicity, that's one of the things that I have been focusing on for many weeks, just being simple, being kind. Also being kind to myself in terms of the emotions that I'm going through as well. So that I had it was about 3 weeks ago, well, probably 4 weeks ago now. Time's a bit weird at the moment. It's probably more like 4 weeks ago. And I was just it was like, was going on inside. And I stayed with that for quite some time. And I just sat down on my own, sitting on the grass. And I went, well, why don't you approach this with the same care and attention and kindness that you do your own yoga and the way that you teach yoga? And then I went, okay, so how can I be kind to my emotions and meet it at a meeting place that, for me, that ligamental tension's got a cool a relationship with meeting. So how am I going to meet that? Can I meet it with kindness? And I met my process with kindness, and it changed straight away. I didn't, and I go, why did I hold on to that for hours and hours of that? Like, you know, we do that funny pattern, don't we? Do I need to hold on it any longer?
Yeah.
So, and being present, yielding, reaching, pulling, and all the baby. We have a nearly 3.5-year-old grandson who hangs out with us a lot, and watching him just become this amazing sportsman. You know, he runs around all day and does all these things, and we're trying to follow him around and doing stuff with him, and he's just getting stronger and more powerful, and we're getting more tired. But it's great. It's a fantastic watching the way they move through those patterns, exactly like you're saying. They do the down dog, or they do a up dog, and they do some movement just in terms of their own creativity, and I'm sure that's where a lot of all of these movements come from, is just watching children move. It's true.
I think so.
Yeah. So it's been lovely talking to you. I mean, it really has been really lovely, because we've tried to. I was going to come to Australia to do the BMC course there, and I just got a bit spooked by all the fires, and I'm going, do I really want to go? And I thought, well, instead of going there, I'll do Bonnie's course, because then I know I'm going to meet. Well, then I found out you were going to be there. Also, Teresa was going to be there, who we had a chat last week. So this is amazing to have contact with you.
Yeah.
It feels very real, and I appreciate your sharing. And I think it's going to be helpful for people just to see that we're, people that are gonna, that we're all we're all in the same ocean. We might be in different boats or in different containers, but I think for me, coming back to being kind with your environment around you, yourself, the people around you. If we can, for me, I can't do a lot in the world, but if I can do that, then that's, I'd like to change the world politically. I have a really big pull inside of me to just kind of pull it all apart and start again, but I don't think that's really my calling at the moment. I think my calling's something else. I'll let other people do that.
Yeah. Great.
Thank you. So I'll stop recording, and we can just have a little chat afterwards if you like. And
okay.
Are you done? Do you want to share anything else?
No, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you. It's nice to share ideas. So thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for coming. Yeah. Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
Stop recording.